Orangutans have been pretty popular in the movies. They had some leading roles in the 70s. We're going to talk about the movie experience with orangutans while we sketch this little buddy. So let's just turn the page and get started. Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is 5:30 in the morning on a Sunday morning. Can you believe, where did the weekend go? It's already Sunday morning. Sunday mornings at 5:30 in the morning is when I like to do a little thing where I pull a random object from the Random Object Randomizer, a toy from the toy box, and I draw it, and we talk about it. And today's random object from the Random Object Randomizer is an orangutan. An orangutan, he says. Orangutans are Sumatran, Borneo. I'm not even sure where that is. I think that's down by India, but it's not in India. But it's nearby. It's India adjacent. It's one of those things you'd expect me to know that I don't, that I just never paid attention to. Geography was never a strong suit for me. But today's random object is an orangutan. Now, we did an orangutan, I feel like, just a few days ago, but I was looking back, and it's been almost 2 months since we've done an orangutan. And that one, we talked about the biology, the history. We talked about all of the habitat and cool stuff. So on this one, I thought we'd focus more on this one. I thought we'd focus more on its pop culture. Very first detective mystery, what's credited as being the very first detective mystery, was The Murders in the Rue Morgue by Edgar Allan Poe. That is horrible composition. That's got to go. Was The Murders in the Rue Morgue by Edgar Allan Poe. And in that book, I don't want to spoil it for you, but the murderer was an escaped pet orangutan who escaped through a window and killed his owner with a razor blade. And that story was ripped from Victorian headlines at the time. In the 1840s, there were stories about primates escaping and killing people with razors in the newspapers. And Edgar Allan Poe took that inspiration and wrote Murders in the Rue Morgue based on those news accounts. Based on those real life news accounts. And that is considered the very first murder mystery, the very first detective story ever written. I find that difficult to believe that is the very first detective story ever written, because I would think that people had been writing at that point. People had been writing for 5,000 years. Now, granted, the first, you could say the first 4,000 years, the majority of the writing was just tracking business transactions. So you could argue that it makes sense that there were no fictional stories prior to that. But then you got the Iliad and the Odyssey, so there were fictional stories, just not to the level of what we would call the Murders in the Rue Morgue. Just not that purely fictional. mystery detective style story. Too many pencil marks. Too confusing. I'm moving a pen. Moving a pen early today. Edgar Allan Poe didn't just write one story about orangutans. He wrote a story. Okay, so when I couldn't have been 11, 12 years old. My parents bought me an audio tape of the complete works of Edgar Allan Poe, and I forget the British actor that read it. It was very impressive. I was very impressionable. And one of the stories that always stood out to me was the story of Hop Frog. And Hop Frog was a dwarf with an extra deformity that made him have to use his forelimbs to kind of scoot around on the floor like a toad. And a very cruel ruler. Yeah, Pamela says most of those types of stories were most likely told during gatherings. Somebody had to start writing them down. I agree. Those were mostly held for campfires. Excuse me, but somebody had to start writing them down. Anyway, Hop Frog work was had a very cruel patron that used to throw things at him and beat him, and he fell in love with this one girl, and the patriarch found out that he was in love with this girl, and made it a point of amusement to beat and abuse the girl publicly. Stripped her of her clothes, embarrassed her. I believe he sexually assaulted her, and just completely broke Hop Frog's mind. And Hop Frog devises this plan to seek revenge. And he convinces the patriarch to dress him and his ministers up as orangutans. Nobody had ever seen an orangutan, so he laughed about how scary that would be for the people and how funny of a practical joke it would be. And he convinces the prince to put tar on his body and cover his body with flax so that he was orange and to hop around like an orangutan. And they put chains on him and the ministers, because the ministers were bad people too. Put chains on him and the ministers that they were supposed to break out of to scare the people. And when they got out there and Hop Frog introduced the orangutans, and the orangutans started acting wild, Hop Frog throws a candle on them and sets fire to the tar. And nobody thinks that it's the prince and the ministers. They all think the orangutans are running around wild and on fire, and they panic and they run away. And Hop Frog scoops up his love and escapes into the wilderness. You know, it's a modern love story. Was it Christopher Lee? You're probably right. It was probably Christopher Lee.
I think so.
Anyway, it was a modern love story. I was impressionable. That story has stuck with me forever. Anytime I think about orangutans, I always think about Hop Frog. Had a very distinct way of saying it in the recording. Hop Frog. It's fantastic. But that is also an Edgar Allan Poe story written in 1849, about 9 years after Murders of the Rue Morgue. Still orangutan orangutan themed, orangutan adjacent. Water in my brush. That and Telltale Heart. Whew. If it wasn't Christopher Lee, whoever read it, really managed to put the tension into their readings. It's a good story. In is it 67? Disney comes out with the Jungle Book. And you've got King Louie in the Jungle Book. Singing one of my all-time favorite Disney songs ever. I sing it all the time. When paper was skin and other more scarce of materials, the storytelling was probably when paper was skin and more scarce, storytelling was probably the way many true fictional stories were passed around until they made it to the more right, exactly, because paper was expensive. That's why all of the early stuff is all transactionary and not, but Homer starts writing it down. Homer starts writing it down, and then you have the histories. You have the libraries of Alexandria, writing stuff down, capturing all of those stories. The libraries of Alexandria had a policy. When the ships pulled in, all the books on the ship had to be brought into the library to be copied, and the ship couldn't leave until copies were made. The ships would show up with extra copies just so they could leave. I'm still mad about that library being burnt down. Still too soon for me to joke about that. But yeah, paper was scarce. They wrote on skins early. But there's Egyptian papyrus. There's the scrolls. There's the rice paper from China. By the time you get to ancient Greece, there's paper. It's just really expensive because the process is done by hand. Yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to get over that. It's still too soon to joke about. Of all the things they could have burnt down, burning down the library, think how much further humanity could have been if that library had not been burnt down. Our orangutans, if you fast forward to 67, we go back to the Jungle Book. Rudyard Kipling didn't write about a King Louie. That's pure Disney. They needed a song. They needed a mid-movie comedic relief song and dance, and so they come out with. They come out the gate with "I Want to Be Like You." One of my all-time favorite songs. How I'm the king of the swingers, boy, the jungle VIP. I've reached the top and had to stop, and that's what's bothering me. I love that song. Love that song. Almost as much as I love this portion of the drawing. The part that gives what I'm doing depth and turns it from lines on a page into a dimensional object.
What was the movie with Clint Eastwood in there, right?
That was Every Which Way But Loose. Came out in 1978. The orangutan was Clyde. It's next on my list, but we got to go through because Planet of the Apes is the next one. You got Rudyard Kipling and the Jungle Book, and then you have Planet of the Apes. After that, you got Dr. Zowis, who was the not only the political leader but also the religious leader, whose job it was to make sure the people, the ape people, did not ever believe that the humans could speak. He had to maintain the secret that the apes at one time were mute and the humans at one time could speak. And there's that very dramatic scene when the doll says "Mama" in the archival cave with Charlton Heston. The Planet of the Apes, because he finds one of the caves of the destroyed civilization. Still not aware. Well, I don't want to give away any secrets, but still not aware. Honestly, it was 1968. If you haven't seen it by now, you're probably not going to. Still not aware that he had just been flashed through space and was landing on future Earth.
It's one of those movies that people get up and left before the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Because it's over.
Yeah. There's Charlton Heston riding into the sunset, and they completely miss the reveal of the Statue of Liberty climbing up out of the sand, and he realizes that they nuked themselves. And that was 1968. That spawned an entire genre of movies. Let me dry this real quick, and we'll come back with some color. The funny thing about the 1968 Jungle Book, Disney didn't really concern themselves with facts at the time. You know, there were a whole lot of ideas floating around about what was considered the third world at the time, which would include India, and how India, a culture, a continent with a rich history and culture, language and writing, religion, and society, became considered a third world to early 20th century, late 19th century, early 20th century Western civilization. How they could consider India a third world is completely beyond me. You show up and here's this rich culture, their own cuisine, their own clothing style, that the riches, they have everything that you would need, a language, a written language, a vast documented history, much older society than Britain. But succumb to the British military complex, and suddenly they're considered third world. And that just completely blows me away. Completely blows me away that was how that happened. Anyway, so Disney took some liberties with Rudyard Kipling's book and added in King Louie. Because there's no King Louie in the book.
He just makes you happy, though.
He does. He just makes you happy. In 2016, In 2016, they did a remake with Christopher Walken. Louis Prima voiced King Louie in the cartoon. He's a jazz performer, popular jazz performer in the mid 20th century. And Christopher Walken voiced King Louie in the 2016 movie. And the interesting thing about that is they realized at that point they couldn't get away with an orangutan. There are no orangutans in India. Even taking the liberties with Rudyard Kipling's book, there are no orangutans in India. So they decided it was too much of a stretch. The talking animals raising a young boy was fine as long as we don't have any animals that don't exist in that part of the world, right? I mean, this is where we draw the line. We're okay with the talking animals, interspecial talking animals. The puma can understand the bear, can understand the snake, and they all know each other by name. Shere Khan, Ka, Baloo, they all know each other by name. We're okay with that. But having an animal that doesn't belong in that part of the world, that's where we draw the line. And so they had to figure out how to do that differently. And what they went with was a Gigantopithecus. Gigantopithecus is a prehistoric ape from about 10 million years ago, about 10 foot tall, and they just decided that he would fit the bill because he was an animal that would have been in India, but not at the time that Mowgli and friends were there. Well, it fills the void. It allows them to have an orangutan type animal without being wrong against the archaeological, paleontological record. To give you an idea, Gigantopithecus was about 10 to 12 feet tall. Orangutans are about 3 feet tall, 3 to 4 feet tall. Let me dry this real quick. We're going to ink it. I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, but I was 7 when Every Which Way But Loose came out. Every Which Way But Loose came out in 1978, and I was 7 years old, and my parents took me to see it in the theater. And to this day, we still reference lines like "Right turn, Clyde," when he would stick his arm out the window and punch whomever was standing there. They had an orangutan named Manus ride around with Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood was a truck driver, and Manus was his beer-drinking orangutan buddy named Clyde. And it was a throwaway movie. The critics didn't think it was going to do very well. Nobody was really excited about it, but the public adored it. And so they made a sequel. But by the time the sequel came out, Manus was too big to play Clyde anymore. So they substituted him with a different orangutan named CJ. Dog farting. I don't remember the sequel doing nearly as well. The sequels rarely do. I think they could have started a whole franchise. Then BJ and the Bear was a television series. Did they have a chimpanzee in that? That loosely based on the success. What's that?
What was the name of the movie?
BJ and the Bear was a television series.
Oh.
Didn't he have a chimpanzee? Wasn't that loosely based on the success of Every Which Way But Loose? Remember the show BJ and the Bear? Couldn't tell you any of the plot lines. I couldn't tell you the character, the actors, the characters. And I'm honestly not able to imagine the animal sidekick.
This review says there was not a chimpanzee.
What was it in BJ? What was it in BJ and the Bear?
They just it focused on the bear.
Was it an actual bear? I thought bear was a chimpanzee or a monkey of some kind.
I said that your main character bear was a friendly bear who had some other.
See, that tells you just exactly how much of an impression that laid on me. In my mind, for 40 years, in my mind, that has been a chimpanzee.
DJ and the Bear was a TV series, and he had nothing to do with it. It was based off.
That's what I said, BJ and the Bear.
Oh, I thought you said. I'm so sorry. You said. Didn't hear that at all.
So what did you look up? What did you look up?
Bear and the Baby TV series.
Bear and the Baby?
Yeah. So,
That's good. That's rich.
I think it'll be a long day. Just never mind.
Never mind. Oh, shit.
Get back to yes, what you said is true.
So BJ and the Bear was a chimpanzee, loosely based on Every Which. How long did that series run?
78 to 81.
Okay. So 4 years? 3 years? 3 years. That's math, people. Pamela says in 1978 they were having their first baby, but our children eventually saw it with us, and they all loved Every Which Way But Loose. You know, hang on, I can't even think it right at the same time. Today's the 19th of July.
Leave me alone.
I love you so much.
Nothing else. I'm irritating.
So okay, and none of this has anything to do with orangutan, except for Every Which Way But Loose. Every Which Way But Loose came out about the same time as Something Wicked This Way Comes. my mother and I could never get those titles straight. And to this day, Something Wicked This Way Comes is known as Every Which Way Wicked. To this day, we still call that Every Which Way But Wicked.
We know what we're talking about.
We do. So, the Sumatrans have a folk tale about another type of orangutan called an orang pendek, which the name orangutan is actually two words, orangutan, which means little man. And there's another orang pendek that they believe that the Sumatrans have a belief that is still out there, that is a different upright walking orangutan, but nobody's ever seen it, and there's no archaeological evidence of it, no paleontological evidence of it. It doesn't mean it didn't exist, and it doesn't mean it doesn't still exist, because these forests are very dense, and they only recently, in 2017, they only recently identified a third species of orangutan, um, and the species that they've identified, the three species have about 100,000 members in one group, and 45,000 members of another group, and only 800 members of this newly discovered group that they've actually said is a different species altogether. And they have no actual head count. They've never even actually done a head count of these things. What they've done is at one point they went out and counted nests. Orangutans make a new nest every night when they sleep, and so they went out and they counted nests in an area and then extrapolated that data across the entire habitat. So the range is, they think it's somewhere between 70,000 to 100,000 of the one species. It's between 20 and 50,000 of the other species, and around 800 of the other species. And they've estimated a 20% loss across the board because there's been a 20% loss in habitat space due to logging and palm oil farming. And so they don't really have a count. You can't really go in and say, yes, definitely, definitively, this is how many there are, or even this is a good estimate as to how many there are, because it's like counting dandelions in your backyard. You go outside and you start counting dandelions. You look around and you see how many dandelions are. You get an overview of how many dandelions there are. You throw your hula hoop out there, and you count the number of dandelions inside that hula hoop, and then you say, okay, and I can fit, 500 of these hula hoops in my yard, so I can take this number and I can multiply it times 500, and that should tell me how many. Where'd all those dandelions come from? Hang on a minute, those dandelions weren't there when we started. Where did these dandelions go? What happened to the dandelions I just counted? So you've got the same issue going on with orangutans and wild animals in the dense forests of Sumatra and the area around there. So, yeah, they don't have an actual count, but they're concerned about them. They do believe the numbers are dwindling because of the palm oil and the logging. And logging, you'd think, is sustainable. You'd think they would create sustainable like we did with the pine industry. But palm oil is just super destructive all the way across the board. I'm so anti-palm oil, it's ridiculous. Anyway, here is my version of the orangutan compared to the photograph. Let's see it from my perspective. You can tell I moved around while I was doing it. I can tell I moved around while I was doing it. There it is from my perspective. So that's what I did today. Tomorrow, what do we have tomorrow? Tomorrow, oh, it's a bingo ball. When it's a bingo ball, that means that whatever it is was too big to fit in an egg, and so we had to do something different. Why is that light on back there? You guys don't need to see that. I have a remote control for that light. Ooh, it makes the bob more spooky. Anyway, when it's too big to fit in an egg, I put a little tag on it. So our ball here says 191. My tag here says 191, and it's the suspense. I know you're up for the suspense. It's the Statue of Liberty, which is funny to me because we were just talking about the Statue of Liberty coming up out of the sand in Planet of the Apes. They did it. They did it. Oh. Anyway, we'll talk about the Statue of Liberty, how there's more than one in the world. We'll talk about how it was a gift from France. We'll talk about how there's controversy because this gift from France sets policy, is being used to set policy in the United States, and they conflict. We'll talk about a lot of fun stuff. We'll talk about how she's not actually green, she's copper. Those are the kinds of things we'll talk about tomorrow morning at 5:30 a.m. Texas time. So you're going to want to set your notification bell so you don't miss that. But guys, thank you so much for joining me. I do look forward to this every day when I get to art with my besties. I truly do run down the stairs every morning just to be here. I've been sitting in this spot since 4:45. We don't start till 5:30. I've been sitting in this spot since 4:45 doing this. Is it time? 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 Because I was so excited to art with my besties this morning. So thank you so much for joining me, Rick and Pamela. Mom and Dad, thank you for your help as usual. Be sure and tune in tomorrow. Same Artistic Biker time, same Artistic Biker channel. And then we dance. We dance until somebody says they see me dancing, because when they see me dancing, I will know that the lag has caught up with the stream and I won't get cut off mid-sentence. They give you a chance to click the clicky thingies so that you can watch another fantastic video just like this one. Everybody gets a chance to say hello and goodbye to each other, ask any questions they may have of each other. But the most important thing is that I don't get cut off mid-sentence, because being cut off mid-sentence is really